Story disclaimer. This story is a work of fiction and is intended for entertainment purposes only. The content includes dark themes, horror elements, and fictional depictions of rituals and sacrifices that are purely imaginative and not reflective of any real-life practices or beliefs. Viewer discretion is advised. This video is not suitable for younger audiences, and parental guidance is recommended. The story does not endorse or promote any harmful behavior, violence, or dangerous activities. Please note that all characters, events, and settings are entirely fictional and created for the purpose of storytelling. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or actual events, is purely coincidental. In this final episode, Amina and Rosemary are thrust into a relentless struggle against the spirits who demand an unthinkable sacrifice. As Amina battles to save her daughter, betrayal, love, and the specter of darkness test her resolve, pushing her to confront the shadow within herself. With each desperate step, Amina uncovers ancient secrets and makes impossible choices, facing the spirit world's terrifying challenges. But when it comes to the final confrontation, the stakes are higher than ever, and Amina must decide whether to embrace the very darkness she's fought against or find another way to protect the one she loves most. As the spirits close in, the line between light and shadow blurs, setting the stage for a showdown that will leave you breathless. Will Amina's newfound power save them, or doom them both? As Amina and Rosemary stepped into the storm, the wind howling around them like a living thing, the figures in the distance began to move. They glided silently through the rain, their forms barely discernible against the darkness, but Amina could feel their eyes on her, cold and unforgiving. The spirits surrounded them, their presence suffocating. Amina clutched Rosemary's hand tighter, her heart pounding in her chest. She had no idea how to fight them, no idea how to protect her daughter from the malevolent forces that had claimed Kofi and now sought to take her as well. The largest of the figures stepped forward, and as it did, the shadows seemed to part around it, revealing a form cloaked in darkness. Amina couldn't make out its face, but she could feel its power, its cold, unyielding presence. "You have defied us," the spirit said, its voice deep and resonant, echoing through the storm. "You were marked, chosen to be ours, yet you resisted. Now you must pay the price." Amina's blood ran cold. The marks on her skin burned with a fierce intensity, and she could feel the darkness inside her stirring, threatening to overwhelm her. But she couldn't let that happen. She had to protect Rosemary, no matter the cost. "What do you want from me?" Amina asked, her voice trembling. "You've already taken Kofi. Why won't you leave us alone?" The spirit's eyes, glowing faintly in the darkness, seemed to pierce through her. "Kofi was only the beginning. You have a power within you, Amina, a darkness that we desire. Surrender to us, and we will spare the child." Amina's heart twisted with fear and despair. They wanted her to give in, to let the darkness consume her completely. If she did, she knew she would be lost forever, just like Kofi. But if she refused, they would take Rosemary, and she couldn't let that happen. Tears welled up in Amina's eyes as she looked down at her daughter. Rosemary's face was pale, her dark. The rain fell harder, drenching Amina and Rosemary as they stood surrounded by the spirits. The tension in the air was suffocating, and Amina's mind raced as she tried to find a way out of this nightmare. The spirit's demand echoed in her mind: surrender to the darkness, or lose Rosemary forever. Amina felt trapped, knowing that whatever choice she made, it would have devastating consequences. But as she looked into Rosemary's dark eyes, she knew she couldn't give in to the spirits. She couldn't abandon her daughter to this fate. There had to be another way. But before she could speak, Rosemary surprised her by stepping forward, her small form defiant against the storm. "You can't take her," Rosemary said, her voice strong despite the fear that Amina knew she must be feeling. "She's mine." Amina's heart skipped a beat. "Rosemary, what are you doing?" she whispered, terrified of what her daughter might say next. The spirits seemed to pause, their attention shifting to Rosemary. The air grew colder, and Amina could feel the darkness swirling around them, growing thicker with each passing moment. She belongs to the darkness, just like I do, Rosemary continued, her voice taking on a strange, almost otherworldly tone. You can't have her because she's already one of us. Amina stared at her daughter in shock. What was Rosemary saying? Was she trying to protect her, or had the darkness already claimed her, twisting her mind? The spirit that had spoken earlier seemed to consider Rosemary's words. The shadows around it shifted, and Amina could feel a palpable tension in the air, as if the spirits were communicating among themselves, deciding what to do next. Finally, the spirit spoke again. If what you say is true, then the child has already begun to embrace the darkness. But the mother is different. She resists, and that makes her dangerous. Amina felt a surge of panic. She knew what was coming, but she wasn't prepared for the words that followed. Rosemary, the spirit said, its voice like ice, if you are truly one of us, you must prove it. Take your mother's soul and deliver it to us. Amina gasped, her heart nearly stopping in her chest. No, Rosemary, don't listen to them, she cried, reaching out to her daughter. But Rosemary didn't move. She stood there, her face expressionless, as if the words hadn't affected her at all. Amina felt a wave of despair wash over her. Could the darkness have already corrupted her daughter so completely? The rain continued to pour down, the storm growing more intense as the moments dragged on. Amina's mind raced, trying to find a way to reach Rosemary, to pull her back from the edge. But the darkness was strong, and she could feel it pulling at her, tempting her to give in, to let go. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Rosemary turned to face Amina. Her dark eyes were filled with a strange mixture of sadness and determination. I'm sorry, Mama, she whispered, her voice trembling. But I have to do this. Amina's blood ran cold. No, Rosemary, please don't, she begged, her voice breaking with desperation. You don't have to do this. We can find another way, together. But Rosemary shook her head, tears streaming down her face. I don't have a choice. If I don't, they'll take us both. I'm sorry, Mama. Before Amina could react, Rosemary reached out, her small hand glowing with a dark energy. The air crackled with power as the shadows around them seemed to close in, suffocating the very life out of the world. Amina felt the darkness tighten its grip on her, pulling at her soul. She tried to fight it, tried to reach out to her daughter one last time, but the power was too strong. She could feel herself slipping away, her consciousness fading as the darkness consumed her. In that moment, as everything began to fade to black, Amina realized the horrifying truth: the spirits hadn't come to claim her, they had come to claim Rosemary. And by forcing her to betray her own mother, they had sealed their victory. The last thing Amina saw before the darkness took her was Rosemary's tear-streaked face, filled with regret and sorrow. And then, there was nothing but darkness. When Amina awoke, she was no longer in the storm. The air was still, and the oppressive weight of the darkness had lifted, replaced by an eerie silence. She was lying on the cold, hard ground, surrounded by the ancient stones of the sacred grove. The sky above was clear, the stars shining down like distant, cold eyes. Amina struggled to sit up, her body aching from the ordeal. Her mind was a haze of confusion and fear, but one thought burned brighter than all the rest: where was Rosemary? She looked around frantically, her heart pounding in her chest, but there was no sign of her daughter. The spirits were gone, the storm had passed, and Amina was alone. A wave of despair crashed over her as she realized the truth. The spirits had taken Rosemary, and in doing so, they had taken everything from her. Kofi was gone, Rosemary was gone, and Amina was left with nothing but the hollow shell of her life. Tears welled up in her eyes as she cried out for her daughter, her voice echoing through the empty grove. But there was no answer, only the cold wind whispering through the trees. Amina felt as if she had been hollowed out, her very soul ripped away, leaving her a shell of the person she had once been. But then, out of the silence, she heard a soft voice, a whisper, faint but unmistakable. "Mama." Amina's heart leapt in her chest as she spun around, searching for the source of the voice. And there, standing at the edge of the grove, was Rosemary. But something was different. The darkness that had once surrounded her daughter was gone, replaced by a strange, ethereal glow. Rosemary's eyes, once so dark and filled with shadows, now shone with a soft, otherworldly light. Amina rushed to her, pulling her into a tight embrace, but as soon as she touched her, she knew something was wrong. Rosemary's skin was cold, her body insubstantial, as if she were not entirely there. "Mama, I'm sorry," Rosemary whispered, her voice trembling. "I didn't mean to hurt you. But they made me do it. They wouldn't let me go until I did." Amina's heart broke at the words. She had known the spirits were cruel, but she hadn't realized the extent of their malevolence. They had forced Rosemary to betray her own mother, knowing it would shatter both of them. But as Amina held her daughter, she realized something else: this was not the end. The spirits may have taken Rosemary, but they hadn't taken her entirely. There was still a part of her that was free, still a part of her that could fight back. "I'm not going to let them keep you," Amina said, her voice filled with determination. "We are going to find a way to break their hold on you, no matter what it takes." Rosemary looked up at her, hope flickering in her eyes. "But how, Mama? They are so powerful. I can feel them pulling at me, trying to take me away." Amina didn't have an answer, but she knew one thing for certain: she wasn't going to lose her daughter. Not after everything they had been through. She would fight the spirits with everything she had, even if it meant facing the darkness within herself. As the first light of dawn began to creep over the horizon, Amina held Rosemary close, silently vowing to find a way to free her daughter from the spirit's grasp. The battle was far from over, but Amina knew one thing for sure: she would not give up, no matter how dark the path ahead. Determined to find a way to save Rosemary, Amina sought out Baba Ojo, the village elder who had first warned her of the spirit's power. The journey back to Umudike was slow and arduous, her body still weak from the encounter in the sacred grove. But she pressed on, knowing that Baba Ojo was her only hope. When she arrived at the elder's hut, the sun was already sinking low in the sky. Baba Ojo was sitting outside, his weathered face turned towards the horizon as if he had been expecting her. His eyes, sharp and knowing, met Amina's as she approached. "You've come back," Baba Ojo said, his voice grave. "I feared you would not return." Amina nodded, her heart heavy with the weight of what she had to ask. "I need your help, Baba Ojo. The spirits have taken Rosemary, but I can still feel her. She's not entirely lost. There must be a way to free her, to bring her back." The elder studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "The spirits are powerful, Amina. They do not relinquish their claims easily. But there may be a way, though it is fraught with danger." Amina's heart leapt at the possibility. "Tell me. I'll do whatever it takes." Baba Ojo sighed, rising slowly to his feet. He motioned for Amina to follow him into his hut, where the air was thick with the scent of burning herbs. Inside Baba Ojo's hut, the air was heavy with the smoke of smoldering herbs. The walls were lined with ancient relics and charms, each one infused with a power that seemed to pulse in the dim light. Amina's heart pounded as she followed the elder to a small table, where he began to carefully arrange various objects: a bowl filled with dark, viscous liquid, a bundle of dried roots, and a small, carved figurine. "This is not a task for the faint of heart," Baba Ojo said gravely, as he set down the last of the items. "What you seek is to wrestle with the spirits themselves. Few have tried, and fewer still have survived. But the bond between mother and child is powerful, and it may be your only hope." Amina swallowed hard, her resolve solidifying. She had come too far to turn back now. What do I need to do? Baba Ojo looked at her, his eyes full of both wisdom and sorrow. There is a ritual, ancient and dangerous, known as the ritual of return. It calls upon the spirits not to ask for their mercy, but to challenge their claim. It requires a great sacrifice, Amina, one that could cost you everything. The word sacrifice sent a chill down Amina's spine, but she forced herself to nod. Tell me what I must do. Baba Ojo nodded solemnly. You must enter the spirit world, Amina. To do so, you will need to drink this potion. He gestured to the bowl of dark liquid. It will sever your connection to this world temporarily and allow you to walk among the spirits. But be warned, the spirits are cunning and vengeful. They will try to trap you, to keep you there forever. You must not let them. If you are to succeed, you must find Rosemary and bring her back before the potion's effects wear off. Amina stared at the bowl, her mind racing. The idea of venturing into the spirit world terrified her, but the thought of losing Rosemary forever was even worse. And what of the sacrifice? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Baba Ojo's expression darkened. The spirits will demand a toll for crossing into their realm. They may take your memories, your strength, or something even more precious. You must be prepared to give up whatever they ask. Amina felt a knot form in her stomach, but she knew she couldn't back down. She had to save Rosemary, no matter the cost. I'm ready, she said, her voice steady. Baba Ojo nodded and handed her the bowl. The liquid inside was thick and black, with an acrid smell that made Amina's stomach turn. But she didn't hesitate. She took the bowl in both hands, closed her eyes, and drank. The taste was bitter, like ash and earth, and it burned as it slid down her throat. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the cold sensation began to spread through her body, starting in her chest and radiating outward. The room around her started to blur and twist, the objects and walls fading into a haze of shadows and light. Amina felt her legs buckle beneath her, and she collapsed to the floor, her vision narrowing to a single point of light in the center of an infinite darkness. The last thing she heard before everything went black was Baba Ojo's voice, distant and echoing, as if from another world. Remember, Amina, find Rosemary and return. But beware the spirits' tricks. They will do anything to keep you. And then, there was nothing. When Amina opened her eyes, she found herself standing in a vast, shadowy landscape. The sky above was a swirling mass of dark clouds, and the ground beneath her feet felt cold and insubstantial, like walking on mist. There were no trees, no landmarks, just an endless expanse of darkness stretching out in every direction. Amina's heart pounded in her chest as she looked around, trying to get her bearings. She was alone in this strange, otherworldly place, and the silence was so complete it pressed against her ears like a living thing. She could feel the presence of the spirits all around her, watching, waiting. She knew she didn't have much time. The effects of the potion wouldn't last forever, and she had to find Rosemary before it was too late. But where to start? This place was vast and unfamiliar, and every direction looked the same. As she began to walk, Amina heard a soft, whispering sound, faint at first, but growing louder with each step. The whispers seemed to come from the very air around her, disembodied voices that echoed in her mind. Why are you here, Amina? The voices whispered, their tone mocking. You cannot save her. She belongs to us now. Amina forced herself to ignore the voices, focusing instead on the task at hand. She had to find Rosemary. She had to keep moving. But as she walked, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. They seemed to wrap around her, pulling at her thoughts, her emotions. You've already lost, they hissed. You should have never come here. Amina's steps faltered as doubt began to creep in. The spirits were trying to confuse her, to make her lose her way. But she couldn't let them. She had to keep moving, had to keep believing that she could find Rosemary. Suddenly, a figure appeared in the distance, a small, shadowy form standing alone in the vast emptiness. Amina's heart leapt in her chest. It was Rosemary. She ran towards her, calling out her name, but as she got closer, the figure began to change. Amina skidded to a halt, her blood running cold. The figure in front of her was not Rosemary. It was a twisted, distorted version of her daughter, her face gaunt and hollow, her eyes empty black pits. The sight of it filled Amina with horror. The twisted figure smiled, its mouth stretching far too wide. "She is lost, Amina," it said in a voice that was both Rosemary's and not. "You cannot save her. She belongs to us." Amina recoiled, fear gripping her heart. The spirits were trying to trick her, to make her believe that Rosemary was gone. But she couldn't believe that. She couldn't give in. "I know you're lying," Amina said, her voice shaking but defiant. "You can't fool me." The figure's smile faded, replaced by a look of cold malice. "You will never find her," it said, its voice dripping with venom. "And even if you do, it will be too late. She will be one of us." Amina clenched her fists, her fear giving way to anger. "I won't let that happen," she said fiercely. "I will find her, and I will bring her back." The figure began to laugh, a sound that echoed through the empty landscape like a peal of thunder. But as it did, Amina noticed something. Behind the figure, far in the distance, was a faint light, barely visible in the darkness. Amina's heart skipped a beat. The light was small and flickering, but it was there, a beacon in the darkness, a sign that there was still hope. Without another word, Amina turned and ran towards the light, leaving the twisted figure behind. The whispers followed her, growing louder and more frantic, but she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. The light grew brighter as she approached, and as she drew nearer, Amina could make out the form of a young girl standing at its center. It was Rosemary, her real daughter, her face illuminated by the soft glow. "Rosemary!" Amina cried, her voice breaking with relief. Rosemary turned to face her, her eyes wide with fear and confusion. "Mama! Is it really you?" Amina rushed forward, pulling her daughter into a tight embrace. "Yes, it's me, my love. I'm here. I'm going to take you home." But before Amina could move, the ground beneath them began to shake, and the light that had surrounded Rosemary flickered and dimmed. The whispers around them grew louder, more desperate, as if the spirits were trying to stop them from escaping. "You cannot leave," the voices shrieked. "She belongs to us. You both belong to us." Amina felt a surge of panic as the darkness closed in around them, but she held on to Rosemary tightly. She wouldn't let the spirits take her daughter. Not now, not ever. With all the strength she could muster, Amina began to pull Rosemary towards the light, towards the way back to the world of the living. The ground trembled beneath them, and the air was thick with the spirit's rage, but Amina refused to give in. The light grew brighter, and Amina could feel the pull of the real world growing stronger. But as they neared the threshold, she felt something tugging at her, trying to drag her back into the darkness. It was the spirits. They weren't going to let them go without a fight. Amina gritted her teeth, focusing all her energy on getting Rosemary across the threshold. The light was blinding now, the whispers deafening, but she could see the way out. They were almost there. But just as they reached the edge of the light, Amina felt a sharp, searing pain in her chest. She gasped, stumbling forward as the darkness surged around her, and she realized with horror what was happening. The searing pain in Amina's chest was unlike anything she had ever felt before. It was as if the darkness itself had reached inside her, trying to tear out her very soul. She clutched at her chest, her breath coming in ragged gasps as she struggled to hold on to Rosemary. But the spirits were relentless. The darkness swirled around them, growing thicker, more oppressive, as it pulled at Amina with a force that threatened to drag her back into the abyss. She could feel the shadows clawing at her, trying to separate her from Rosemary, trying to pull her under. "No!" Amina cried out, her voice raw with desperation. She tightened her grip on Rosemary, refusing to let go. "I won't let you take her." But the spirits were powerful, their hold on her growing stronger with each passing moment. Amina could feel her strength waning, her body trembling as the darkness seeped deeper into her. The light that had been their beacon was fading, swallowed up by the encroaching shadows. Amina knew she was losing the battle. The spirits were too strong, too determined to claim her. But she couldn't give up. Not now. Not when they were so close to escaping. In a final, desperate act, Amina reached deep within herself, summoning every ounce of willpower she had left. She focused on Rosemary, on the love she had for her daughter, and let that love fill her, driving back the darkness, if only for a moment. "Rosemary," Amina whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "You have to be strong. You have to fight. Don't let them take you." Rosemary looked up at her, tears streaming down her face. "Mama, I'm scared. What if they take you instead?" Amina's heart ached at the fear in her daughter's eyes. She knew what had to be done, even if it meant sacrificing herself to save Rosemary. She had to make a choice, the terrible, impossible choice. With a heavy heart, Amina made her decision. She knew that if she didn't act now, they would both be lost. The only way to save Rosemary was to sever the bond that tied her to the spirits, even if it meant sacrificing herself in the process. Amina took a deep breath, her mind clear and focused despite the pain. She leaned down and kissed Rosemary on the forehead, her heart breaking as she whispered the words that would change everything. "I love you, Rosemary. Always remember that. Now go back to the light." Before Rosemary could protest, Amina pushed her daughter towards the light with all her remaining strength. The force of the push propelled Rosemary forward, into the safety of the real world, leaving Amina behind in the darkness. The pain in Amina's chest intensified, but she refused to cry out. She could feel the darkness closing in, the spirits finally getting what they wanted. They were going to take her, just as they had taken Kofi. But at least Rosemary was safe. That was all that mattered. The shadows wrapped around Amina, pulling her down into the abyss. The light was gone, and there was nothing left but darkness. Amina's body felt heavy, her limbs numb as the spirits claimed her. She was sinking deeper, deeper, into the void. But just as Amina was about to be consumed completely, she felt a sudden surge of energy, the spark of light in the darkness. It was faint, barely there, but it was enough to give her hope. Amina focused on that spark, holding on to it with everything she had. She didn't know what it was or where it had come from, but she knew it was her only chance. She pulled herself towards it, using the last of her strength to fight against the pull of the spirits. The spark grew brighter, and Amina could feel the darkness recoiling, its hold on her weakening. The pain in her chest began to ease, and she could feel her body growing lighter as the light pushed back the shadows. The spirits screamed in rage, their voices filling the void with a deafening roar. But Amina didn't stop. She kept moving towards the light, refusing to let the darkness claim her. And then, suddenly, she was free. Amina found herself standing in a place that was neither the spirit world nor the world she knew. It was a strange, liminal space filled with a soft, ethereal light that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The ground beneath her feet was solid, yet it seemed to ripple like water with every step she took. The air was thick with a sense of calm, but also with something else, something ancient and powerful that Amina couldn't quite put her finger on. She felt no pain, no fear, only a strange sense of peace that was at odds with the terror she had just experienced. As she looked around, Amina realized that she was not alone. Figures began to emerge from the light, their forms indistinct and shimmering. They were not like the spirits she had faced in the darkness. These beings were different, their presence soothing rather than threatening. One of the figures approached her, its face obscured by the glow of the light. Amina felt a sense of familiarity, as if she knew this being, though she couldn't say how. The figure reached out a hand, and as it did, Amina's heart skipped a beat. The being's touch was warm, gentle, and with it came a flood of memories of Kofi, of their life together before the darkness had taken hold. Amina gasped as she realized who this being was. "Kofi," she whispered, her voice trembling with a mix of hope and disbelief. The figure nodded, and though Amina couldn't see his face, she knew it was him. She could feel his presence, his love, just as she had in life. Tears welled up in her eyes as she reached out to him, but her hand passed through his form like mist. "I'm so sorry, Amina," Kofi's voice said, soft and filled with regret. "I couldn't protect you or Rosemary. I failed you both." Amina shook her head, her heart breaking at the sound of his voice. "No, Kofi. It wasn't your fault. It was the spirits, they took you from us." Kofi's form flickered, as if he was struggling to maintain his presence. "There's not much time, Amina. The spirits will come for you again. But there is a way to stop them, to save Rosemary." Amina's breath caught in her throat. "How? Tell me what I need to do." Kofi hesitated, and Amina could feel the weight of the words he was about to say. "You have to make a choice, Amina. The spirits feed on fear and despair, but they are also bound by the choices we make. You can either join me here, in this place, and be at peace, or you can return to the living world and fight for Rosemary. But if you choose to go back, you must do so without fear, without giving the spirits any power over you." Amina's mind raced. The thought of reuniting with Kofi, of finding peace, was so tempting. But then she thought of Rosemary, of the life she still had ahead of her, and knew what she had to do. "I have to go back, Kofi," Amina said, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "I have to save our daughter." Kofi's form began to fade, the light around him dimming. "I knew you would say that," he said, a note of pride in his voice. "Be strong, Amina. Remember, the spirits only have power if you let them. Trust in your love for Rosemary, that will guide you home." Amina reached out, trying to hold onto him for just a moment longer. "I love you, Kofi. I'll never forget you. And I'll be waiting for you when the time comes," Kofi replied, his voice growing fainter. "Goodbye, my love." With that, Kofi's form dissolved into the light, leaving Amina alone once more. The peaceful calm of the place lingered for a moment, but then it began to fade, replaced by the cold, oppressive weight of the real world. Amina closed her eyes, focusing on her love for Rosemary, on her determination to save her daughter. She felt the light around her pulse one last time, filling her with warmth and strength, before it vanished completely. When Amina opened her eyes again, she was back in the world of the living. Amina's return to the living world was abrupt and jarring. The cold, oppressive darkness that had surrounded her before was gone, replaced by the familiar sights and sounds of the forest. She was lying on the ground, her body aching, but she was alive. Rosemary was there, standing a few feet away, her eyes wide with shock and fear. "Mama! You're back," she cried, rushing to her side. Amina pulled her daughter into a tight embrace, relief flooding through her. "Yes, my love. I'm back. And we are going to end this, once and for all." But even as she spoke the words, Amina knew that the spirits would not give up easily. She could feel their presence lurking at the edges of the forest, watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. The air was thick with their malice, their hunger. Amina helped Rosemary to her feet, her mind racing as she tried to think of a way to protect them. Amina and Rosemary stood together in the clearing, the oppressive atmosphere pressing down on them like a physical weight. Amina could feel the spirits closing in, their presence a cold, malevolent force that sent shivers down her spine. She knew that they would not let them go without a final confrontation. As she held Rosemary close, Amina's mind raced. Kofi's words echoed in her thoughts, the spirits only had power if she allowed them to. But how could she stand against such overwhelming darkness? How could she protect her daughter from forces beyond her understanding? The air grew colder, and the shadows deepened. Amina could see the figures of the spirits beginning to materialize around them, their forms twisted and grotesque. They moved silently, their eyes glowing with an unnatural light filled with malice and hunger. A voice, cold and authoritative, echoed through the clearing, reverberating in Amina's mind. It was the same voice she had heard in the spirit world, but now it carried an edge of desperation. You have returned, but you cannot escape us. The child belongs to us, and so do you. Surrender now, and we may be merciful. Amina's heart pounded in her chest, but she forced herself to stand tall. You can't have her, she said, her voice trembling but resolute. I won't let you take her. The spirits seemed to recoil at her defiance, but the voice continued, more insistent. You have no choice. The darkness is in you, Amina. It has marked you, just as it has marked the child. There is no escape from it. Amina felt the truth of the words like a dagger in her heart. She could feel the darkness within her, lacking, waiting for her to falter. But she also knew that she had something the spirits did not, a love so fierce that it could drive away even the deepest shadows. But then, just as Amina was about to respond, she felt something shift within her. A cold realization crept into her mind, chilling her to the core. What if Kofi's warning had been more than just advice? What if the spirits had left a part of themselves inside her, a seed of darkness that was now beginning to grow? As if in answer to her thoughts, Amina felt a sudden surge of pain in her chest, a sharp, burning sensation that made her gasp. The marks on her skin began to glow with a dark, ominous light, and she could feel the darkness inside her stirring, as if it were waking up. No, Amina whispered, her voice filled with fear. She had thought she could resist the darkness, that she could fight it, but now it seemed that it had been waiting for this moment, biding its time until she was at her most vulnerable. The spirits sensed her fear, and their presence grew stronger, more oppressive. You cannot fight what you are, Amina, the voice said, its tone almost gleeful. The darkness is a part of you, just as it is a part of us. Embrace it, and you will finally know peace. Amina's mind raced, trying to find a way out, but the pain was overwhelming, the darkness too powerful. She could feel it spreading through her, filling her with a cold, consuming hunger. It whispered to her, tempting her with promises of power, of control, of an end to her suffering. And then, as the darkness threatened to consume her completely, Amina made a choice, a one that would change everything. She let go. She stopped fighting the darkness, stopped resisting its pull, and allowed it to flow through her. But instead of surrendering to it, she did something the spirits had not anticipated, she took control. The darkness surged through Amina, filling her with a power unlike anything she had ever known. But instead of letting it consume her, she wielded it, bending it to her will. The marks on her skin glowed brighter, but now they were under her command, their light pulsing with a dark energy that she could direct. The spirits recoiled in shock, their forms flickering as they realized what was happening. What are you doing? The voice demanded, its tone tinged with fear. Amina turned to face the spirits, her eyes glowing with the same dark light as the marks on her skin. You thought you could control me, she said, her voice strong and unwavering. But you are wrong. The darkness may be in me, but it does not own me. I own it. With a wave of her hand, Amina unleashed the power of the darkness, sending it crashing into the spirits. They screamed in agony as the dark energy tore through them, scattering their forms like mist in the wind. But Amina didn't stop there. She focused all of her will on the darkness, forcing it to bend to her commands. The marks on her skin pulsed with a furious light as she drew the spirit's energy into herself, absorbing it, turning it into her own power. The spirits fought back, but they were no match for Amina's newfound strength. One by one, their forms dissolved into the air, their voices fading into nothingness as she drained them of their power. Finally, when the last of the spirits had been vanquished, the clearing fell silent. The darkness that had surrounded them was gone, replaced by a calm, quiet stillness. The night sky was clear, the stars shining brightly overhead, and the oppressive weight that had hung over the forest had lifted. Amina stood in the center of the clearing, her body trembling with the effort of what she had done. The marks on her skin had faded, leaving only faint traces, and the dark energy that had filled her was now a quiet, steady presence, no longer threatening to consume her. She turned to Rosemary, who was watching her with wide, tear-filled eyes. "Mama, what happened?" Amina knelt down and pulled her daughter into a tight embrace, tears streaming down her own face. "It's over, my love. The spirits are gone. They can't hurt us anymore." But even as she spoke the words, Amina knew that this victory had come at a price. The darkness was still a part of her, and always would be. She had taken control of it, but it had changed her, made her something other than what she had been. As they stood together in the clearing, Amina realized that their lives would never be the same. The darkness had left its mark on them both, and while they had escaped the spirits, they would never truly be free. But they were alive, and they had each other. And in that moment, it was enough. As the first light of dawn began to break over the horizon, Amina took Rosemary's hand, and together they walked out of the forest, leaving the darkness behind. But deep down, Amina knew that the shadows would always be with her, a part of her that could never be fully erased. And as they disappeared into the light of the new day, the forest stood silent and still, its secrets hidden once more, waiting for the next soul to wander into its depths.